Blog Talk Radio.
Well, hello, and Happy New Year, family. Happy New Year, Happy New Year. Thank God. It is finally 2021. I don't know about y'all, but Dr. Pitts was ready for 2021. And House Talk pregame is still right here grinding this thing out. What an amazing, amazing year we have lined up for you. Oh, my God. It is going to be an amazing year. We are coming out the gate, guns blazing. I've got Jared Johnson and Ronnie Ransom still with me. My son Andre is going to be joining us. Basketball season. So let me just get this straight, y'all. We're going to be running this football season thing, even though the HBCU divisions did not have a season. We, in honor of football as a whole, we're going to run the football episodes until the end of the Super Bowl, and we see who that is. And then we're going to transition into basketball season, and hopefully with this COVID-19 vaccine coming out, we will be able to really take our fun and information for you to a whole nother level during basketball season. But look, folks, pregame is all about family. It is all about our HBCU families, our student athletes and professional athletes and their families. And it's all about pregame's relationship with Heritage Sports Radio Network and the HSRN family, which we are now a part of and have been for, the past 3 months now. You can hear us on HSRN right now at 11 a.m., also at 10 o'clock in the evening, and we have a third spot now on HSRN where you can also check us out on Sunday evenings at 6 o'clock. Jared.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and Happy New Year's again. We're back 2021. Still going to give you guys everything that we have. I'm looking forward to embarking on this new year and having you guys a part of it as well. And as you guys know, House Talk pregame is on a whole new level compared to what you guys may have known of House Talk in the past. And we're here to be transparent. We discuss very important issues that are going on the football field in our HBCUs, also off of the football field in just your daily life, giving you guys down-to-earth knowledge, making the discoveries, and sharing our truth as a people. We know some of you guys may be tired from 2020, but we're going into 2021, and we have the answers for you. We're ready to optimize, and let's get it. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Thank you, Jared, and good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year to everybody. I hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas break like we talked about last week, and I hope everybody brought in the new year safe. I hope everybody practiced social distancing. Look, we're ready to start this show off this year, first show of the year. I'm super excited for this conversation today. So, look, during the show, we'll be taking call-in questions and comments by simply dialing direct at 515-605-9744. or email your HBCU shout-outs, questions, or comments to htpregame@gmail.com. And also, I know we're having some technical difficulties right now, but once we get it back up, check us out also on Facebook Live on Dr. Lauren Pitts' Facebook page and send us any comments or questions on her Facebook Live during the show as well. Back to you, Dr. Pitts.
Oh my goodness! So I'm trying to get this live thing going on. Yes, that we're going to go live on Zoom and Facebook as soon as I get the technical difficulties worked out, gentlemen. So bear with me on that. One of the things that we like to do each week, and we're actually going to continue in 2021 because we recognize how important it is we do a diagnosis of the week, and the reason why we do that is because we are deeply concerned and moved by the stigma that's associated with mental illness in Black and brown communities all over the globe. So what we wanted to do is make sure that we're keeping you informed, making sure that you are able to have the appropriate information that you need to make a well-informed decision about your mental health. So in doing that, we take the liberty, if you will, of presenting you with a diagnosis of the week, where we provide you a mental illness each week, and we give you information about that illness in the hopes that if there's anything about the illness that you recognize in yourself or those you love and care about, that based on the additional information that we provide for you to seek help and treatment methods, that you will take full advantage of the information that we're sharing with you. We do put a disclaimer out there that we are not diagnosing you, and we strongly recommend that you do not diagnose yourself. However, we do want to give you this information in the hopes that it will be instrumental in encouraging you to seek professional mental health support so that you can find out exactly what is going on with you or what is going on with a loved one. So our diagnosis for this week is gambling disorder, and the answer to that question is yes, gentlemen. You can go ahead and log back in. So the diagnosis for this week is gambling disorder. And you're like, gambling disorder? That's an actual disorder? You mean me losing my money at bingo and poker and all the other stuff that we do? That's a disorder. It is. It is definitely a disorder when we find that it is out of control. And what I mean by that is gambling disorder involves repeated problematic gambling behavior that causes significant problems or distress. It's also called gambling addiction or compulsive gambling. And let me be clear on this. For some people, gambling does become an addiction, and it can have the consequences that we see in drug addiction or in other forms of addictive behavior. The effects that a person gets from gambling are similar to effects someone with alcoholism gets from alcohol. They can crave gambling the way someone craves alcohol or other substances, and compulsive gambling can lead to problems with finances, relationships, and work, not to mention potential legal issues. And we absolutely, positively don't want that to be the case with any of you, our viewing and listening audience, because it can literally turn your life upside down. We find that people with gambling disorder often hide their behavior, just like those with drug addiction and substance use and abuse, and they may lie to family members and others to cover up their behavior and may turn to others for help with financial problems. Some gamblers are seeking excitement or action in gambling, while others are looking more for escape or numbing. So when we think about how is gambling disorder diagnosed, it's going to require some demonstrated behaviors over like a year's time, and you're going to need to demonstrate at least 4 of these behaviors over that 4-year time. The need to gamble with increasing amount of money to achieve the desired excitement, restless or irritable when trying to cut down or stop gambling, repeated unsuccessful efforts to control, cut back on, or stop gambling, frequent thoughts about gambling, such as reliving past gambling experiences, planning the next gambling venture, or thinking of ways to get money to gamble. Often gambling when feeling distressed. After losing money, gambling, often returning to get even, referred to as chasing one's losses. Wow, I've never heard that term before. Lying to conceal gambling activity, jeopardizing or losing a significant relationship, job, or education or career opportunity because of gambling, and relying on others to help with money problems caused by gambling. Keep this in mind. A person with gambling disorder can experience periods where symptoms subside, and gambling doesn't seem to be a problem in between periods of stronger symptoms. But in contrast, gambling disorder, and this is something I didn't know either, guys. You all know I keep it real with you. I'm transparent about what I know and what I don't know. And for some of this stuff, it's a learning experience for all of us. But just like so many other addictive behaviors, research has shown us that gambling disorder tends to run in families but environmental factors may also contribute. Symptoms of the disorder can begin as early as adolescence or as late as older adulthood, and men are more likely to begin at a younger age, and women are more likely to begin later in life. Before I pass it off to you, Ronnie, the first person that comes to mind concerning this is Michael Vick and the dogfighting.
Yep, I remember that.
Yeah, right. Because
did you ever read the indictment?
No. Should I look?
God,
Yeah. Serious?
To really understand, like, and this was right after he had signed, I think it was a $120 million contract. The amount they were fighting for was anywhere from 1,000 to 5,000 per fight.
Wow.
And he was supplying most of the money, but I mean, just what they would do to the dogs if they won or if they lost, or when his cousins were watching the house for him, and when they finally got caught, what they tried to do to the dogs real quick.
Wow.
That whole story was crazy. You threw away $120 million for basically $5,000. It was ridiculous. It was a lot.
Crazy.
Wow.
So, when we're talking about gambling disorders, and before I get into treatments and things like that, I want to have a real moment when we talk about gambling. For me personally, I've never been one to necessarily dibble and dabble in, straight up gambling or, the lottery ticket system and stuff like that. But however, and we're talking about money management and, stuff like that today. So, I'm somebody who looks into the stock market and things like that, looking at stocks, wanting to build my portfolio, looking at real estate and stuff like that. I would consider that calculated gambling. You do the research, you see the trends and stuff like that, and at the end of the day, I'm making a gamble that this money I invest into this stock or into this real estate or whatever the case may be, I'm gambling and betting that I'm going to get my money back and then some. So, when we're talking about this gambling disorder, like Dr. Pitts said, we're talking about when you're really sacrificing your day-to-day living, your mortgage payment, the car note, your grocery money, you're sacrificing your children's money, you're sacrificing your marriage, you're giving away possessions now, to pay off debts and things like that. So when we talk about gambling disorder now, there are no necessary specific medications for gambling disorder. However, medications are given to treat the behaviors and characteristics of gambling disorder, which the root cause of that is a lack of impulse control, not being able to use sound judgment and good decision-making skills, showing that lack of self-control and that lack of impulse control. So you might have medications like your SSRIs, and also medications to treat like ADHD and things like that. Therapies, of course, would be cognitive behavioral therapy and also motivational interviewing to help address lack of impulse control. Some of those techniques would be reflective listening. So doing reflective listening is basically just listening to the client, share their story, share their testimony, what they got going on and why they're here. And one of the things you want to do during reflective listening is being able to express empathy for that client situation when you're listening to it. Also, one of the key points, and this is kind of hard with somebody who might be dealing with gambling disorders, is developing discrepancies between the client's goals and aspirations and their behaviors. For example, if you have a client suffering with gambling disorder and they come in and say, well, I've created a budget and, however I want to save $500 a month, but any extra money I got outside of my budget, what's wrong with gambling? Well, there's a discrepancy. If you're telling me you came to therapy to, limit, reduce your gambling because it's harming you and stuff like that, but, you're telling me you got this goal, you've made this budget, however, any extra money that can go towards your budget that would help you and your family, you decide to still gamble that, there's a discrepancy there. So those are things that you have to look out for. And also with that, adjusting to the client's resistance as opposed to just flat-out confrontation and rejection, because somebody typically, whether it's gambling disorder, drug abuse disorder, eating disorder, things like that, typically when they're met with resistance or challenging and things like that, oftentimes they'll buck back or just flat out refuse to listen and express and display defiance within the session, because now you challenged them and you called out the discrepancy. So you have to be very mindful of that when dealing with somebody like that. So, at the end of the day, you also have gamblers. Gamblers Anonymous, but at the end of the day also, when we're talking about a gambling disorder, at the end of the day, if you have a family or if you have loved ones who are depending on you, at the end of the day, it's your priorities that matter most. If your priority is gambling and, not your family, then, there's going to be more severe consequences than you just being broke. And honestly, being broke is probably going to be the best treatment for you because now you don't have no money to spend. You might also lose your family, loved ones, close ones, and things like that in the process. But, you have to be very careful with this because this is a monopoly money. This is your real life money that you're gambling over here. So you have to be very careful of that and not allow it to, consume your life.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've seen a lot of people. I never had no addiction to gambling or anything, but I would go to the casino in college, for fun and things like that. But I see how it can get addictive, and sometimes I'll go. It's the same people in there, like 1 o'clock in the morning, just stuck and focused on it. And it's like some people that's their job, especially a lot of times when people retire. You see a lot of older people in there gambling and things like that. But I just went in for the urge. Go in. If I get $40, I'm done. I'm cashing out and I'm leaving. And most of the time I went in there one, but I got out before it got too bad and things like that.
If I lose $1, I'm out. I'm checking out. It hurts.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a boss who gambled $300 a day on lottery tickets. They would bet $150 in the morning and $150 in the evening on scratch-offs every single day.
He probably didn't win much either, but that's crazy.
I think the only time they did, I think they won $40,000 one time.
Oh,
that was it. But they probably spent close to that in lottery tickets.
Right. And that's crazy. If we're gonna jump into the recap of 2020, as everybody knows, it's been a year to remember or a year to forget. Whichever side you're on. But it's been challenging. I know a lot of people went into 2020 with certain goals that you wanted to achieve and aspirations and growth or job, career paths, things like that, graduating, football players, upcoming season, to prove yourself, to get a scholarship, to go to the NFL or any other professional level, and it all turned upside down within 2 months into 2020. And I think it was a year where everybody had to take a step back, learn how to adjust, maybe look at things that's important in your life that you maybe been overlooking, being grateful for things that you may have been overlooking as well, and really learning about yourself. And I think 2020 was definitely a lesson for all. A lot of unfortunate events with the coronavirus, of course, that confirmed cases, over 80 million confirmed cases worldwide, over 35 million in the U.S., over 1.8 million deaths worldwide from coronavirus. So nobody saw that coming. But for those that are here, still in good health, that is something to be happy about, and know that 2021, looks to be brighter. And then other things, on just a lighter side, some of the most searched things this year on Google was the election. We know how the election was and how everybody was in an uproar about that, and the George Floyd case and the police killings and things like that. That was the number one search. Number 2 was coronavirus. Number 3 was Kobe Bryant. Number 4 was coronavirus update. And then number 5, most used search was coronavirus symptoms. So it really took over a lot of our lives. At the end of the day, we're still here. And, for us personally, I'm pretty sure we all go through our own struggles and battles and with coronavirus and things like that. But, again, we're here to look forward to 2021 and take anything positive from 2020 and build on that and move forward into 2021. So that's, the recap for 2020 from my end. You guys have anything to add to that?
I do. I just wanted to say real quick, just so that people know, in 2020, we did HBCU shout out. So we just want to make you all aware that, we did a lot of shouting out. We provided you all a wealth of information on HBCUs all across the country, providing the history and what we believe is really important for you to know about them. And to that point, though, we invite you to go to hbculifestyle.com and the 100, THEHUNDRED -7 SEVEN.org. Again, that's hbculifestyle.com and the 100-7.org to really continue to expand your knowledge on historically black colleges and universities and all the extraordinary things that they're doing that we believe as black and brown persons you should be intimately acquainted with. And to that point, as I think about 2020 and everything that went on, one of the things that, how can I put it? One of the things that showed up for me as a constant theme as I was just reviewing the year and particularly looking at 2020 within the context of athletics is that black and brown faces were everywhere. Everywhere, you know, in the forefront, particularly in football and basketball. But our faces were everywhere. I want to acknowledge that because we shouted him out a couple of weeks ago, that Alvin Kamara from the New Orleans Saints has tested positive for COVID-19. So we send our thoughts and prayers and well wishes for a speedy recovery to him. Also, I wanted to point out that one of my heroes, Deion Sanders, was hired at Jackson State University. And what I found interesting, and I said, you know what, I'm going to ask the fellas because they're going to tell me the truth and let me know if I'm being a little extra, is that when you read the information about Deion Sanders, I want to share something that just sort of resonated with me and rubbed me the wrong way. It's talking about him being hired, and it says, though Jackson State hasn't played a game yet, the SWAC postponed fall sports and is hoping to have a spring football schedule in 2021. Neon Deion has had a huge impact in college football. Sanders' hiring in September placed a vocal and high-profile legend in the FCS and at historically black college and university. Whether he becomes successful at winning football games or not, Sanders has already been a beacon for the great aspects of HBCUs and the so-called lower tier of major college football. That bugged me. That rubbed me the wrong way, guys. Am I being extra? Am I being too sensitive?
No, I think you're right on. You talking about kind of they're setting the expectations too low. Is that what you get at?
Why are we? Because here's the thing. You know, we have talked week in and week out about sheer greatness that has come from historically black colleges and universities. We've talked about it within the context of athletics. We've talked about it within the context of the economy. We've talked about it within the context of civic duties. We've talked about it within the context of politics. I mean, the contribution that we make to this nation and to this world, I don't think in any capacity should ever be labeled lower tier anything.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm offended. I'm just saying, I'm offended, and I think that again, it speaks to how easily, as a people, we are dismissed and discounted and made light of and marginalized and disenfranchised and put in a box where we're told to just shut up and dribble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I definitely agree. And then the other part of that, you know, what they said, all he has to do is basically nothing from here on out, and it's been a great, you know, accomplishment for HBCUs or the African American culture. I think that he has to, and I'm pretty sure he'll do good, but I think he has to win, and it has to be a successful situation, because if not, in the same breath where they say this is enough, if he doesn't, they're going to bash him and they're going to bash HBCU football. You know what I mean? So I think it's important that they go undefeated or go to a bowl game or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they just had another recruit from Auburn yesterday. He signed and transferred to Jackson State.
Mm-hmm.
So he's making an impact. So I see it being a successful situation in time.
Yeah, and I think I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to what you and Jared were saying about that. And my only concern is about him being there is, you know, what's going to be his 5-year to 10-year plan, you know, because he's not there for, you know, clout. He's not there for money. You know, if anything, he has to be the person, like we always talk about, that person being the one who, you know, puts everything in motion and has the resources and the power to create a system. So you know, when I think about Deion Sanders going to Jackson State, I see this as, you know, a monumental opportunity to, you know, screw expectations, whatever expectations people have of him, screw the expectations. You know, he has a chance here to build a foundation. You know, I'll take a foundation over expectations any day. And if he can create a system where, you know, not only black athletes get a fair chance in college and get resources and networking opportunities that are for them and not with, you know, an ulterior motive, and also creating opportunity for more black coaches and people of color and, you know, athletic departments and things like that, because we always talk about this at the NFL level. There's not enough black coaches in the NFL when over 70% of the players are black, you know. Well, same thing in college. You know, most of predominantly the big Power 5 schools and the big Division I schools are coached by whites, and, you know, the rosters are predominantly black. So, you know, I hope that, you know, for Deion Sanders being at Jackson State starts something where, you know, we have other, you know, prominent black athletes, whether or not they want to coach or not, but going to HBCUs and helping build a foundation for coaches, quality coaches, to be seen and recognized for their genius and not just for what they can do for somebody else. And, you know, that's my wish and hope, you know, for Jackson State as well as Deion Sanders, because this can be a positive thing going forward in 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, it's powerful. The other two things I wanted to say before we send it back to you, Ronnie, for your highlights, not football related, well, sort of football related. One of them is. I think that it's also noteworthy to mention PWI, Vanderbilt University. A young lady by the name of Sarah Fuller on November the 28th made history becoming the first woman to play in a college football game for a Power 5 program. She is a kicker. And not only is she a kicker, but she did the darn thing. She debuted on 11/28 and ended up kicking for extra points. They won that game. She went on the following week. And even though they ended up losing against Tennessee, she still showed up and shined and made the field goals that she was required to make. So hats off to Sarah Fuller at Vanderbilt University. And then also just wanted to note, as we're going to be transitioning into basketball season in a few weeks, Becky Hammon, the first woman to become acting head coach in NBA history. She was the assistant coach for the San Antonio Spurs, but when their head coach was ejected from the game, she was put in place as the acting head coach. Look, right? She was put in place as the acting head coach. So hats off, standing ovation, and serious applause to Becky Hammon with the San Antonio Spurs. That's all I have. Ron?
So, you know, looking back on 2020, and I reflected all day Thursday. You know, shout out to my dad. His birthday was on Thursday as well, New Year's Eve. He turned the young age. Turned the young age of 64 on Thursday, so shout out to him. But, you know, I looked at 2020, and one of the biggest things I took away from it was, you know, it made me appreciate the little things a lot more in life. You know, for me, you know, before, you know, the shutdown happened, I consider, you know, everything really starting on March 12th when the NBA had shut down. That's when I considered everything really like going like, oh, this is real. And that first about 50 days of the, quarantine and stuff, I really appreciated it because it slowed everything down and it put a lot of things in perspective for me. Fortunately, I was fortunate enough to not have to worry about, employment during the quarantine. Being, a mental health provider, our services were greatly needed all of 2020 and going to be, needed going forward more than ever. So I was blessed and fortunate in that. But I just came to appreciate things a lot more, just, not allowing anxiety to cloud my mind and judgment a lot going forward, just being in the moment and appreciating things for what they are and just soaking up that moment. And, that's something that I talk with a lot of clients about, especially those who deal with anxiety disorders and things like that, not allowing that anxiety to rob you of your joy and your hope and your confidence and things like that. When, we place a lot of value and emphasis on things that 2020 showed us really don't mean anything. A lot of our material possessions don't mean stuff. A lot of the things that we, slave over don't mean a lot outside of just, love, compassion for one another, being around family, being around loved ones and things like that. Those things that we took for granted, not having that for long periods of time, it impacted me a lot, but it also impacted a lot of other people. So, just having that appreciation for, every single day and getting the most out of every single day, as well as having patience and understanding, not allowing, my emotions to get out of whack or, responding emotionally, responding logically and things like that. Those are some of my biggest takeaways. And, as we're coming up on January 26th, it was tough losing Kobe and his daughter, Gianna, back in January. That was just the beginning of the year. And who would have thought, I thought that was probably the worst thing that was going to happen in 2020 was losing Kobe and his daughter. Right. 2020 definitely said, hold your beer, I got some more for you. But,
right.
But I want people to understand going into 2021, there's one thing that you can focus on and make your New Year's resolution is, appreciate the little things, enjoy each day. Don't worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about next week. That's not promised to us. All we're promised is today. Tell somebody you love them. If you're thinking about somebody, hit them up. Check up on them. If you haven't talked to somebody in a while, see how they're doing. Do a nice gesture for somebody today because they might need it. Doing those things that we used to do all the time for people. We need to get back to doing that. I pray that HBCUs, for the student athletes, I pray that in 2021 things can go back to normal because not having a sports season, especially football season for a lot of these HBCUs is tough. And a lot of them are, just, scrambling to be able to put stuff together. So I'm praying for them. Mm-hmm. And I hope that we can get back to some type of normalcy in 2021. So, that's my recap. Also, shout out to, the Lakers, my favorite NBA team. Shout out to them for winning the championship. And shout out to my favorite player, Bron. I'm going to try. Hopefully, if fans are allowed in the stadiums, I'm going to try and see you before you retire. But, we're going to get this repeat going this year. Shout out to the Kansas City Chiefs for winning the Super Bowl back in February. It's looking like, they might repeat again this February if there's a Super Bowl, hopefully. Shout out to the Los Angeles Dodgers on winning the MLB championship. Well, World Series. I'm sorry. Let's hope 2021 is a lot better than 2020.
Yeah, indeed. Just so you know, too, Ronnie, Andre is diehard Lakers.
There we go.
Look, right? I was looking at jerseys. I was going to get him I am going to get him a Kobe jersey, and now I might have to get you one too. Them daggone jerseys.
Birthday in February.
I'm a Lakers fan too.
Oh Lord. Okay.
Hey, Dr. Pitts, my birthday is February 13th.
Okay. Noted. So look, gotta get my man squad their Lakers gear. We will definitely do that. Dr. Pitts promises I will hook y'all up. It's 2021.
I'm a 2X and relax.
Extraordinary thing.
All right.
Yeah. I wanted to, as we're getting ready, Jared is going to transition us in a minute, literally a minute, into our subject matter for today's show. I wanted to very quickly share some findings that the NCAA did concerning student-athlete COVID-19 well-being. It was a study that they did, and the study was designed to examine the impact of COVID-19, the pandemic, on student-athletes' current physical and mental well-being. The survey was designed by the NCAA research in collaboration with the NCAA Sports Science Institute and the 3 national SAAC governing bodies. Over 37,000 student athletes responded to the survey, spanning the 3 divisions, all sports and athletics conferences. And the key findings, which I found just mind-blowing, and the reason why I want to share them is because it speaks to the very essence of why our show is so important. The first thing was a majority of participants reported experiencing high rates of mental distress, as Ronnie just touched on, since the outset of the pandemic. And over a third reported experiencing sleep difficulties. More than a quarter reported feeling sadness and a sense of loss. And 1 in 12 reported being so depressed that it had been difficult to function constantly or almost every day. While 80% reported knowing how to access a medical provider for physical health needs, 60% of men and 55% of women reported that they know how to access mental health support in their current location. The question is, though, will they? 4 in 5 athletes surveyed indicated that both local regulations and the lack of access to appropriate facilities were barriers to athletic training, and other emotional barriers included a fear of exposure to COVID-19, 43%, a lack of motivation at 40%, feelings of stress or anxiety at 21%, and sadness or depression, 13%. Over 70% of participants indicated feeling positive about their ability to pass their courses this semester, and over half, 51%, indicated feeling positive about their ability to keep up with classes this semester. Nearly 90% of student athletes surveyed reported communicating with teammates multiple times per week, and 56% reported communicating with coaches multiple times a week. Generally, the more frequently participants communicated with teammates and athletic staff, the more likely they were to report feeling positive about such communication. And that goes to the discussions that we've had each week about not isolating and not allowing the stigma associated with mental illness and mental health to keep you from in being deliberate and intentional in being socially engaging and really reaching out to a social network that can help you through what has undoubtedly been a very, very difficult time for all of us. And then the last finding I wanted to share was participants indicated they would generally look to coaches as their primary source for information related to training, physical well-being, mental health, and social connections during this time. Many reported they would look to their athletics department in terms of academic support, career planning, and financial assistance resources. The resource most requested from the NCAA was information about the fall semester and return to play. And to that end, I want to circle back to what the importance that we've placed upon we know that these colleges and universities have a mental health, person, right? They have some sort of department, but there, in our opinion, as we've discussed week in and week out, there has to be more. There has to be a mental health practitioner or practitioners assigned specifically to the athletic department to address the mental health needs of the players. Can we agree on that? Are we in agreement on that, gentlemen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
And
it's not
it's funny
enough to say that they're on campus. Go ahead.
No, it's funny you say something because there was an article I had read a couple of weeks ago, and it was on a former University of New Mexico football player. His name was Najee Flowers, and this happened in 2019. He died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound while he was a part of the football team. And one of the players on his team said that, you know, they brought in psychological experts and things like that to help with mental health. And what he said, you know, quote unquote, was, we're football players. That's all we know. Like, bringing somebody in here to talk to us about mental health is not going to help us. And I think that what he's really saying is, and just what you hit on, it has to be more than just bringing somebody in. I think you have to bring people in that relate to the athlete. 9 times out of 10, it's at University of New Mexico. I'm guaranteed they brought in a Caucasian, you know, psychological professional. There's nothing wrong with, you know, that, you know, that's in the world. It's a lot of those. But to really hit home to a lot of these athletes, you may be the first person they talk to about mental health, and for it to be somebody outside of their race, I think a lot of times that may be starting off on the wrong foot, depending on their personal background. So I think that they have to ask the athletes, what is it that you need in a psychological professional before they just start throwing them onto them on campus. But that's definitely an interesting topic.
I definitely agree with that, Jared. And to your point about that, you know, about it, even if it were a Caucasian, you know, mental health professional, and the biggest thing is, you know, being culturally competent enough to be able to work with various, you know, people of color and religion. That's the biggest thing. And to your point about, you know, needing a mental health professional for student athletes, I think, you know, you would like for that mental health professional to at least have some type of background in college athletics. And I mean, you know, I know we can't sit there and make that a mandate or automatically a guarantee, but I think it should be highly recommended, and not bringing somebody in when something, you know, a tragedy happens, like, you know, losing a teammate to a gunshot wound, or, you know, teammate, you know, passing away from other reasons and things like that. I think having that mental health professional there from when you come in your freshman year and building that rapport, you know, even if you've never met with a mental health professional, it's all about building rapport with whoever it is you're providing the services to. And even expanding on that, having multiple mental health providers for the athletic department, because, I mean, you know, the bigger the school, there's going to be more student athletes. So just having one person for all those student athletes, that practitioner is going to get burnt out quick. You know, and Dr. Fitz can definitely speak on that. You know, once you hit a certain amount of clients, you know, these are real people's lives who, you know, we're dealing with and real issues. So, you know, once you hit a certain number of people that you're working with on a daily basis, you as that practitioner have to be aware that, you know, you might need extra help, or you need to reduce your caseload so you can help those who are already on your caseload with the issues they got going on. But, yeah, no, I think this is something that should definitely be pushed and included into, you know, student athletes, you know, across the country for PWIs and HBCUs.
Well, this is definitely, you know, this is definitely what Dr. Lauren Pitts Coaching and Consulting is all about. It's about HBCUs, you know, literally all over the country, connecting with us and working with us as we continue to provide them support. That's our primary goal. Our primary mission and vision for Dr. Lauren Pitts Coaching and Consulting is to be able to provide the appropriate mental health support that is needed for HBCUs, athletic programs, the scholar athletes and their families, and really all of those that are invested in the overall holistic well-being of the student athlete. And that same premise where the league is concerned, understanding that whether we're talking about the NFL or the NBA or the MLB, we dominate these athletic arenas as Black and brown persons. And to your point, Ronnie, it is too much for one person to handle. I can't handle 107 HBCU athletic programs by myself. However, our organization can. And as we create these, what I would like to consider partnerships, because we are wholeheartedly invested in the mental well-being of our Black and brown communities all across the nation and all around the globe, we invite you to go to drlaurendpitts.com and read about our programs, read about our services, and recognize that we're here for you. We are absolutely positively here for you. We are willing to work with your programs. We understand that there is a need, and we want to be proactive in providing the support for you that you need to help the holistic student athlete and professional athlete maximize their performance, not just on the field or the court, but in life. That's what we're all about.
Yeah, so let's jump into it after all that great information from Dr. Pitts and Ronnie giving the breakdown on gambling for our diagnosis of the week. And as they said, it hits on what our topic is today, what everyone loves to have, but a lot of people do not feel comfortable talking about it. But we're going to talk about it today on House Talk, is money management. We're going to dive into money management as it relates to our student athletes. What is the objective and subjective financial literacy level of our student athletes? What are student athletes' preferred models of financial education? And how do student athletes budget and spend their money? Without basic financial literacy, student athletes who are managing between different sources of income and how they use it are at risk of increased stress and anxiety levels. So we're going to definitely dive into the topic that is not talked about on college campuses. I know from my experience, and I know Ronnie can probably attest, there was no educational platform to learn about financial literacy as a student athlete. We're going to discuss the hard part of money management, transitioning into professional sports as it relates to money management. And then also I want to just throw out a stat to let you guys know the importance of this. Less than 4% of U.S. colleges and universities in the U.S. require students to take a personal finance course. And also in high school, in order to get to college, financial literacy is not a required course subject to gain access to a university. So that speaks to the overall notion of what society feels, the level of importance that financial literacy has to young people and specifically student athletes. And also student athletes are less knowledgeable about their finances than non-student athletes on college campuses. So we definitely have to dig into what's deeper, what's behind it. How do we feel about finances? How did we navigate through college, handling money, even though as student athletes we were not paid, which we talked about before, but how did we get into learning about money, investments, saving money, budgeting? All of those things are important because they're going to be a skill and a tool that is needed far beyond your college athletics. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. I know Dr. Pitts and Ronnie are going to have great insight as well. And this is definitely going to be a great show, much needed, that I'm looking forward to.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Pitts.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to piggyback off a little bit what Jared was saying. For me being, at Virginia State, money was not, outside of me and my teammates talking about how much money we got for refunds or, summer jobs and stuff like that, money wasn't really discussed on campus, especially in class. And, me personally, I didn't take any personal finance classes. Money wasn't really something that was talked about in my house outside of, you get a good job, you save your money as much as possible, always have a rainy day fund. That was one thing my parents always talked about, was having a rainy day fund. But it was always funny because I used to always hear my dad, and he went to high school in the 70s, and he was like, they talked about how to budget, a checkbook, how to write checks, how to go to the bank and start an account and stuff like that. And those were things that we never even touched, even in high school. So, yeah, I think, the importance of understanding money, how it works, how to make money work for you and things like that is something that should be taught to student athletes, because at the end of the day, the schools are doing the very same thing to them. They're making investments in these student athletes, and they're profiting off the returns of these student athletes with physical labor. So I think the student athletes deserve to know how that works in their favor as well.
No, I definitely agree. And also, just another stat, as we get into it, and some of you guys out there listening may have heard, but 60% of NBA players go broke within 5 years of retirement. 78% of former NFL players have financial difficulties within 2 years of leaving the game. And I think when we're talking about financial literacy, it has a greater effect than just your pockets or, the home you live in or the car you drive or the food you eat on the dinner table. It goes deeper into the mental aspect, and a lot of former professional athletes who have been forced to walk away from the game and they didn't have their financial picture in order, they ended up resorting to drug abuse, domestic abuse, and getting into derailment in their life, which has unfortunately caused suicide on some of these athletes. And we're not talking 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We're talking in the last 5, 10 years that this is happening. So we definitely want to, stress the importance of that. And then also I think it's important for our student athletes to begin to develop a relationship with money. And I know, personally speaking, growing up in a church and, faith and things like that, it was perceived to me that money was something that was not something that was Christian-like, to have a lot of money, or not even just a lot of money, just to be able to be comfortable and not have to be penny pitching. And I think that as student athletes, we have to get out of that notion and form a better relationship with money and find out how having your finances in order can allow you to have a better life and allow you to help others as well in carrying out whatever your purpose is on this earth. Dr. Pitts, what is your take on finances, student athletes?
I think it's systemic. I think it's a systemic issue, and I think the fact that both of you, as men of color, both attended HBCUs and you both acknowledge that it wasn't taught on campus, isn't that, or do you think that I'm on point with the systemic piece? And what I mean by that is when you look at poverty and lack and financial illiteracy as it exists in so many of our communities all across the nation, why would we think that students would be coming on campus financially literate? It goes back to what we said several shows ago about why isn't financial literacy taught at HBCUs as part of the core curriculum? Remember that show? I called the president out because how can it not be? How can we, as an HBCU family, boast about our contributions to the global economy, but yet not see the importance and the significance of financial literacy being a part of our core curriculum, not only at the collegiate level, but why is it not taught in elementary school? Why is it not taught in high school? Well, let's keep it real. The public school system in this country is run by the dominant culture. So doesn't that provide space for us as a people to be deliberate and intentional in providing financial literacy services within our community? Because let's face it, everybody wants more money. Everybody wants more money. So
absolutely,
how can you want more money without understanding the importance of being financially literate? And to your point, as you were sharing those statistics, something else as I was doing my research, I discovered is, and I think you mentioned it briefly, Jared, the financial challenges among retired professional athletes. And I think it's important to mention that because, as you all said, what is every student athlete's goal? Everybody wants to go into the league, right? So, you know, when we look at the financial problems that are common among professional athletes, why? Well, research shows us that many professional athletes lack the skills necessary to effectively manage their personal finances. Well, why is that? Because they were never taught as a kid. They were never taught as an adolescent. They weren't taught at the collegiate level. So you come into the league as an adult still clueless about how to manage your personal finances. And research also shows that athletes start declaring bankruptcy as early as 2 years after the end of their athletic careers. And 16% of NFL players go bankrupt within the 12 years following retirement. What's wrong with that picture? Look at this. $3.2 million. $3.2 million is the median income of an NFL player. But yet 16% of NFL players will go bankrupt within 12 years of retirement. $30,000 is the average yearly pension of NFL players at the age of 55. There's something wrong with that picture.
You said $30,000 is a yearly pension, or
30?
That's what they. That's what
30.
the NFL custom every year.
29,000 is the average yearly pension of NFL players at age 55.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I thought it was more than that.
And to your point about it not being, taught at home and things like that, and when we talked about, these young student athletes, 18, 19, especially in the NBA when they're 18 and 19, and when you're in the NFL about 21, 22, you go from, some of these student athletes come from where they, everybody in their family hasn't made $100,000 together, and your signing bonus might be, anywhere from $100,000 to, 20, 30 million when you sign your contract. And instantly you not only changed your life, you changed your entire family's life. And that's a lot to process. Even at 18, 19 years old, even though you're considered an adult, that's a lot to take in at one time. And not having those money habits, another thing people fail to realize is these athletes only get paid during their season. So for the NFL, you get your 16 game checks. NBA gets their 82 game checks. And after that, you're not paid for 3 or 4 months out the year. But if you're still spending money like you're getting a game check every week, these habits do build up over time.
It's like giving a 5-year-old keys to a Corvette.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that hits on, when it comes to money management, is the lifestyle, because whether you're in the NFL or not, somebody can make $100,000 a year. Somebody can make $60,000 a year. But at the end of the year, that person who makes less can be in a better position because of their lifestyle and the understanding they have of managing their money. And I think a lot of people get into, like Ronnie hit on earlier, the material things. And you get so caught up in it. And there's nothing wrong with having it. But, Jay-Z says, some people believe it, some don't, but he says if I can't buy it twice, I don't need to buy it. And, that's like the simplest term that some people can start kind of applying to their life financially. And another thing I was thinking about is, and this is a question that I can imagine if I was in college and somebody had came to me, or if the coach had somebody come talk to us about financial literacy, and they say, start, getting better with your finances, budgeting your money, I would have said, well, where's this money coming from? First of all, because we're not getting paid, we don't have a job. If we do, starting because I'm working more than I'm going to practice. So how am I supposed to begin to create a better life financially if I'm not even receiving any income as a college athlete? Where should they start at in learning and bettering themselves?
If I could answer that question real quick, and to your point, because when, for me, when I was in college, during the off season, we would have, spring practice and stuff like that. I was working at Kmart on my off days, 4 hours here, 5 hours there, just to have gas money and spending money. Now, when I was in undergrad, definitely saving money and stuff like that wasn't necessarily on my mind. But to the student athlete who is wondering how they can, start to develop this, I would just say start to study these terms and study, money management and wealth management. Just look up YouTube. I always say YouTube University is always the best place to start when you want to learn how money works, how you can save money, learning money terms and things like that, like inflation, interest rates, debt, good debt, debt-to-income ratio, terms like that might be foreign to you. But once you start to understand the terminology and understand how, even though you might not be bringing in a lot, if you can practice good money management with $100 or $1,000, those same habits can help you practice having good money habits with $100,000 and $1 million. So starting small might be the best thing, in avoiding unnecessary debt while you're in college or soon after college. And I think that's the biggest detriment to a lot of people, whether you're a student athlete or just a regular student, is just swarming yourself in debt as soon as you graduate, whether it's student loans, going getting a brand new car, apartment, whatever the case may be. You're graduating. And when we talked about gambling earlier, this is something else I want to mention. Getting your college degree is a gamble as well, because there's no guarantee that you getting your degree is going to translate to making money in the real world. And we see so many people, whether you go to a PWI, HBCU, no matter the case, there is nowhere where it says if you get this 4-year degree, you're guaranteed a job. So that's a gamble right there. And you're coming out of school. I think the average student comes out of school with almost $35,000, $40,000 in student loan debt. Well, you're already in the hole. You're not making no money. So learning those skills and those terminology while you're an undergrad is probably the best thing for you while you don't have any money right there. So when you do get it, you can start to apply those tools and skills that you've learned.
I want to challenge that thought, in that I think that financial literacy education needs to start in kindergarten. And truth be told, it could start before then. I think that financial literacy, particularly for our people, is as important as driving while black, walking while black, and doing anything else while black. I think that financial ignorance is a setup that perpetuates a cycle of poverty, lack, need, and want, and further exacerbates the mass incarceration that we see among black and brown persons, and particularly men of color. I want to share something, and I'm not sure if either of you are aware of it, and I definitely want our listening audience to be aware that the NCAA is very much aware of the problem of financial literacy among student athletes and what that looks like as student athletes may enter the league. They actually did a pilot study, and that financial literacy among student athletes program, it identified the problem as most college students, including student athletes, have limited to no exposure to personal financial education when they arrive on campus. Without basic financial literacy, student athletes who are managing between different sources of income, as you just stated, Ronnie, and how they use it, are at risk of increased stress and anxiety levels. So that's something I want to highlight right there, because for Ronnie and I as mental health practitioners, and just as black and brown persons, how many of you have practically lost your mind when you felt like you didn't have the money to make your rent, your car payment, your car insurance? How many black and brown people have had their car insurance policy canceled because they couldn't pay the premium? How many black and brown people have been evicted because they couldn't pay the rent or the mortgage? How many black or brown people had to go with a public defender because they could not afford the costly legal representation? And that list goes on and on and on. And what this study from, which, as we all know, wears on your mental well-being, because stress will kill you. Stress will kill you.
Absolutely.
The NCAA determined that their goal was going to be to identify both the level of financial literacy among student athletes and the best way to reach them. And they did a program called a Money 101 program. It was a free, non-credit, 8-week course designed to introduce resources and tools that would help develop basic finance skills. And there were 6 topics covered, which, Ronnie, you just spoke to. Money management, investing, credit, saving, paying for education, and working and earning. My great aunt, who was just an extraordinary contributor in my life and really emphasized for me as a small child in kindergarten the importance of financial literacy. And she said so many Black people buy what they want and beg for what they need. And I was little when she said that to me, and it stayed with me. It has absolutely stayed with me forever because it is so truthful. Hence why we see, we can ride through the projects and see $2,000 rims, but you're living in the projects. Seriously, what's wrong with that? So what the study found is that there were some concerns with spending behavior. Of the 21% who had a monthly budget, 92% followed it, which is pretty good. But the bigger issue is only 21% had a monthly budget. 47% experience anxiety when managing money, you think. It's hard to manage something you don't know anything about. Right. When monthly spending was tracked, over 46% of transactions were food. Sheesh. So people don't even know the percentage breakdown of how their finances should be allocated as far as their day-to-day living. Interest and experience. 7.26% was the average ranking when asked to identify their interest in financial literacy from a scale of 1 to 10. 1 not interested at all, and 10 fully interested. 60% did not receive financial education in high school, and you ready for this? 65% did not receive financial education at college orientation. And then the results showed that when they did this pilot program, that they did see a 10% increase in score from the pre to the post test. And when asked 3 financial knowledge questions on the pre and post test, 59.34% either answered all the questions wrong on both or correct on one, but incorrect on the other. So the bottom line here is more than not, student athletes are financially illiterate. And I believe that that is a systemic problem that exists in our homes all across the nation and all around the world for multiple generations. And it goes back to, Jared, what you brought up in a few shows back about legacy and wealth management. How can you build wealth if you're financially ignorant?
Yep, absolutely. That's real. And I think, like, when it comes to, and this goes back to college athletes being paid, and I don't think we could talk about this topic and not bring that up, but that is another way where you can teach student athletes how to manage their money by paying them and putting the right people in place to help them navigate that process for the 4 to 5 years of college while receiving that income. Because if you look at a college athlete, you have the cafeteria, so your food is there. So this goes back to people saying, well, you have food, you have this, you get this, that, and the third, all these luxuries. But at the same time, regular students on campus, they don't have those luxuries. They might not have a meal plan. So they're having to use their money and budget their money accordingly to be able to eat 2 times a day, 3 times a day, 1 time a day, whatever it is. But a student athlete, especially at major schools, I'm going to eat today. I don't need to budget any of my money to make sure that I eat because the cafeteria is open to me. I have protein shakes after my workouts and things like that. So I feel we are hindering our student athletes by not paying them and being able to introduce them to the real world before they actually get into it, post-graduation. And then another thing I believe is learning about credit cards and things like that, like credit utilization, having classes on credit that can teach our student athletes how to avoid debt, like Ronnie said, and knowing about trade lines and things like that. Because there was a former athlete at the University of Maryland, his name Earl Badu. He had graduated and he got into some money issues with a chiropractor. And it was one situation, he wrote a bad check, and then it was a $300,000 judgment that was entered against Badu in April. And he had been sued by Alan Cornfield, a Silver Spring-based chiropractor in Montgomery County, over issues related to fraud, misrepresentation of facts, misappropriation of funds, unjust enrichment, and restitution based upon unjust enrichment. So basically, him not being financially illiterate, him not having any financial background or whatever was the deeper issue, it actually led to him jumping off of a bridge and killing himself.
Oh, my God.
So, like, these financial issues that people are sweeping under the rug for our student athletes because they may think you're young, you don't have to worry about it, it's really hurting our student athletes at the end of the day. That harm is going back on the family, and then 9 times out of 10, if they're financially illiterate, their family members may be financially illiterate. Now it comes to how we even going to have money to bury him or to have a funeral. So it affects so many different layers of the student athlete that we can't even see, and it leaves a lot of tragic consequences that are not necessary and can be prevented.
Absolutely. And another point, and I don't know how frequent this is at the big Power 5 schools or Division I schools, but I know at Virginia State, I had a lot of teammates who, after freshman year or sophomore year, decided to get their own apartments. So, I can imagine for those student athletes who are Division I athletes, and I think they're currently receiving a stipend, even though it's not a lot. But I wonder, like, if you choose to move off campus and live on your own apartment and things like that, how does that impact your psyche as being, a college student and also a student, being an athlete where, now you have to balance, real world problems such as rent, electric bills, water bills, things like that. Getting that money from the name, image, and likeness deal that's going to be coming in the next couple of years. How do they factor, like, for students who live off campus, how are we going to, manage their money or help them with that so they don't fall into debt or get kicked out, evicted or something like that. And now they can't even perform on the field and things like that. So to both of y'all's points, I think starting financial literacy as early as possible. And, I've even seen where they have card sets now for kids where they have, like, for the ABCs, they have different financial terms for each of the ABCs on there. So exposing them to that at an early age is going to be very crucial.
It goes to what we put in the promo to introduce this week's show. Financial literacy, in my opinion, is more important than athletic ability, because the reality of it is, to your point about the gentleman that committed suicide, money problems will literally make you feel like you're going daggone crazy. Not having enough to provide food, clothes, and shelter, and let's keep it real. You've got student athletes out there that are parents already. When we look
I was
at
just thinking that.
Yep. Just think about some of the conversations that we hear during the NFL draft, for example, where I know last year there were a number of athletes, both black, brown, and white, that were fathers already, getting ready to go into the league. And you both said, I think that's a common theme, that people want to go into the league so that they can achieve levels of financial freedom. Well, if you don't know how to manage that wealth, how can that be? And I want to just put this disclaimer out here because I feel it. There may be some who are questioning, well, who are we to tell them about, money management? And I will put it to you like this. We're not wealthy yet. It is definitely coming. But I will tell you that one of my mentors, who has been my mentor now for almost 30 years, and I'm so thankful for him, is a wealth manager for one of the largest banks in the country. And total transparency, because Dr. Pitts keeps it, I'm honest. Had I listened to him 30 years ago, I would be a multimillionaire by now. I was hard-headed, I was immature, I was irresponsible, and I didn't have the appropriate family support that was needed concerning financial literacy. A good part of what I learned about finances prior to him coming into my life was all by trial and error. So I went through a period in my life where my credit tanked. I did file for bankruptcy before. So a lot of what I learned from crashing and burning. So you'll know, I believe, I listen to what he say now, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I listen to what he says now, and I follow his lead on how I manage my finances and how I invest, and my financial advisor and my portfolio and all of that. But certainly, had I listened, I would have achieved wealth many, 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 many years ago, several times over. I think that we do ourselves a disservice as a people, and clinically I understand it, but personally it frustrates the heck out of me. I just don't get why people are so full of pride that they aren't willing to take the necessary steps to educate and empower themselves, because knowledge really is power. I said a long time ago, the dominant culture's greatest fear is an educated black man and woman. It just saddens me and it frustrates me how folk will live, for example, in the projects for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 generations and are good with that. Multiple generations of being welfare recipients. Like, why is that pain not great enough to do something different? Why does educating oneself have to be associated with acting white or wanting to be white? Don't you want the things that the white folk have? Heck yeah, you do. That's why you got that big bond TV project. It's frustrating to me. And again, this is what this show is all about. It's about the knowledge and the power to liberate and to transform lives to more and different and better, because we've decided to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So we continue to share this information week in and week out, and in the hopes that folk will wake the heck up and get help and seek. We say every week, you can call us, you can ask us, you can email us. We ain't putting you on blast and saying, Hakima Brown from, Louisville, Kentucky called us and emailed us talking about what. We're not going to do that. We're here to help.
And then another study was done, and it was talking about how when student athletes had greater levels of financial knowledge, their financial confidence increased at a higher rate than student non-athletes. And they're justifying this by the fact that student athletes are used to practicing, and from practice, that's how they get their confidence for the games. So they're saying as you educate student athletes, increasing their knowledge on financial literacy, he or she will become more confident in their finances, which is a positive. Now they're also saying that they can also become overconfident, which some athletes do on the playing field, which can lead to risky financial decision making. So I think that it comes down to, in the intro, what is the student athlete's preferred method of learning about financial literacy? Me, myself, if I was in college, I would rather want to learn hands-on. Some student athletes might not be the type to learn hands-on. Some may need to read. Some may need to learn visually. So I think breaking down how each student athlete on campus prefers to learn is a starting point to, better educate them on financial literacy. And that goes back to having the mental health professionals on campus. You have to break it down to each athlete and find out what's best for them to get them started in the right direction. That's what I believe as far as my preferred method for learning as it relates to me.
Hey, Jared, to that point, that pilot study that the NCAA did, that was actually one of the things that they touched on. And the 37,000 athletes that participated in that program, determined that student athletes prefer one-on-one financial counseling. And I think even though it didn't state it directly in everything that I read in the report, and I didn't read the whole report, but clinically, I think that speaks to privacy and not wanting to be judged or criticized, or there's a level of vulnerability that is associated with saying, hey, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? That people may be really uncomfortable with. So,
right.
Certainly, and let's face it, finances are a very private matter, but they get real public real fast. They get real public real fast.
I think as a student athlete, and I think everyone is kind of is reserved when it comes to talking about finances, to people they know or they don't know. But as a student athlete, you're at a point where you're in the beginning of your financial literacy life or financial portfolio, whatever it is. And I don't think that it should be as much pushback or resistance to learn about it, because you're still at that age where people will look at you and they're not going to shun you and bash you for not having your finances in order. You know what I mean? For a lot of student athletes, they may not have even worked a job yet. So you're not in a position where the person on the other side of the table is looking at you saying, man, you're a jerk. You just blew all this money. You don't have any money and things like that. You're, at a position where you're getting watered. And I think that should hopefully cause the student athlete to open up more about their finances, knowing that they don't have any track record to be embarrassed about. Only thing that I would see being an issue is maybe if they don't feel like talking about their family's background with finances, as that might be a touchy subject. But I think that the conversation definitely needs to be had. And like Dr. Pitt said, we're not financial experts or anything like that. So, but I know one thing that I started originally was using the Acorns app. And some of you people may have heard of Acorns app, but it gets you into investing an easy way without even having to think about it. It's like investing on autopilot, where every time you swipe your card, money gets put into an investment account, and you can actually put as little as $5 a month, $5 a week into the account as well, and watch it grow and things like that. So that's something that I initially did, and that was my introduction to investing. And I'm nowhere near an expert. I'm still trying to learn about the stock market and things like that. It's confusing to me. I even wish I had started learning about this early, as a kid. This was sitting on, I think it would have definitely benefited me. So that's my take on financial literacy. It's definitely important. I mean, I have family members who, from my family, the most recent generation grew up in Brooklyn, New York. My grandmother moved up there from South Carolina and grew up in the projects and things like that. So, my cousins and I, we're like that generation that's really starting to kind of open up and explore and expand financial literacy more. And that's all because, our parents are telling us and encouraging us to do so. So I think it's a collaborative effort on all ends.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Dr. Pitts.
No. That's all I was going to say. It's totally it's a family affair.
And some other things that also, helped me in my financial literacy journey, because I'm somebody who, even though, like I said, the one thing my parents definitely harped on me growing up was the ability to save money and have money for a rainy day. And that proved to be very beneficial for me during 2020. And I hope that's something that people take away from 2020 going into 2021 is having a rainy day fund at all costs, at least at the bare minimum, a month's worth of your expenses, just in case something goes wrong. Because, 2020 showed us that, jobs you would never think about not being able to do, they weren't able to do this year. Restaurants, bars, businesses, barbershops, hair salons, you name it, they couldn't work. And so, having that rainy day fund put to the side is very important. And then for me, when I was in college, I was somebody who had terrible spending habits. If I had it, I was going to spend it on something. And I definitely found myself in a lot of unnecessary debt coming out of college. But one of the things that helped me change my mindset on, financial literacy was a book that I talked about before, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And if, for student athletes or somebody in high school, that's one of my favorite books that I recommend to people who want to, start to learn about how money works and understanding money is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Another book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And if you find yourself like me where, you're, out of school, and, you got a car and stuff like that, find yourself in a lot of debt and you're wasting your money. One of the things that really helped me was a book by Dave Ramsey called The Total Money Makeover. And one of his big methods is called the baby steps. There's 7 baby steps, with one of them, the second step being paying off all your debt as fast as possible. And I tell that to people, having as little debt as possible is going to be your best friend, because if you're somebody who's going to get debt and say you're going to use it for a business or entrepreneurship opportunity or something like that, and then it goes left, well, the debt is still there. You still have to pay that money back. So when you're doing things like that, make sure you have a plan, a business plan, or if you're going a partnership route, make sure everybody has their ducks in a row. But I would say, those books right there are what helped me really expand my knowledge of how money works and help me now as, starting fatherhood and stuff like that. And that's one of the things I definitely want to teach my son when he gets here is how money works and being able to make money at an early age. So that way, and I think people get misconstrued when we talk about wealth as being a lot of money. And that used to be my definition of wealth. Now my definition of wealth is freedom. Having that freedom and ability to do what I want, go where I want, without having to worry about how my bills are going to get paid at the end of the day. And I think that's what wealth is. No matter how much it is you make a year, if you're financially free and to be able to really enjoy life and do what your heart follows, I think that's when you have wealth.
Total life prosperity.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Jared, did you want to say something before I wrap us up?
Yeah, just last thing, just some of the steps. As it goes back to the student athletes, like if you're in college, you're thinking about, what you can do, especially with coronavirus happening, and you maybe saw your family struggle with, losing jobs and unemployment and things like that, the stipends come into effect and things like that. Some things to think of are the power of budgeting is one thing, and also learning how to save and investing. And like we mentioned earlier, just want to hit on it again, a lot of the Power 5 schools, the student athletes do receive stipends, and I think that it can be a tough decision to make, but I think it will help them down the line, especially if they come into large amounts of money in professional leagues or even whatever career they go into, managing their money and dealing with family. In college, you may be in a position where that stipend that you're getting is looked at as a lot of money to your family, your friends, things like that, but you have to make tough decisions to say, I have to budget this money. I just can't give all of this money away. And learning how to deal with those tough decisions now before you get to the $1 million contracts will help you a little more, I believe. So I think learning how to make them tough decisions, not being ashamed to talk to somebody as you are in a young stage where you're allowed to be a little more vulnerable, I think that's the first steps you should take. And a book that I read was The Richest Man in Babylon, which talked about money as well. Pretty easy read, and the same thing that Ronnie said, Think and Grow Rich. Just simple steps that you can start today and take notes on to help you progress.
It really is all about education, and to both of your points, when you're faithful over little, you are better equipped to manage much. And yes, that is biblical. The Word of God says that when you're faithful over little, God will bless you with much. When we look at that just conceptually, where money is concerned, if you can't manage $10, how are you going to manage 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000? You have to learn how to do that effectively. And one of the other things that I say too is a broke person can't teach you how to build wealth. So I say that because I'm very, very particular about, now I learned the hard way. I'm very, very particular. As I said, I have a financial advisor and wealth manager, and I listen to him, and what he says to me, in essence, is the financial gospel, because he has not failed me. He has not failed me. His area of expertise is wealth management, and like I said, I recognized that I didn't listen before, so I definitely listen now. The other thing that I wanted to touch on real quick in this last minute or so is that we didn't talk about those that are going into the league and their agents and financial representation. I'll just say this, that again, it circles back to the education. I'm real big on the Better Business Bureau and references and checking folks out in the whole 9 yards. Stop signing stuff without reading it, whether it's a contract, a car loan, a home loan. Like, stop signing stuff. Stop signing stuff without reading it. You have to read it, and do not be embarrassed, ashamed, or humiliated to say, what the hell are y'all talking about? I don't know what this means. Get a dictionary and a thesaurus and look stuff up. Google stuff. Ask questions. Don't be embarrassed to admit that you don't know something, because guess what? If you allow that embarrassment to keep you from educating yourself now, trust, when your embarrassment is on the public spotlight, you'll wish you had asked. And I think that it's important for athletes at the collegiate level and those transitioning into the league. You got to educate yourself about this stuff. You have to really, really, really kick over the rocks and stomp and let some dust come up and find out what's going on. I'm real big on asking for references and checking people out and asking the hard questions. Asking the hard questions and making sure folks are giving you comprehensive answers. Because if you get to him and hawing about my money, we're going to have a problem. But then you find out after the fact that somebody done stole your blind. Okay. Well, if you were knowledgeable, it would be that much harder for folk to take advantage of you. Don't be the next victim of a Ponzi scheme or some other racket that's going on to swindle you out of your money. On that note, we're done for today, fellas. Listeners, we hope that, as we come out week after week in 2021, that you will join us in these discussions. We want you to call in. We want you, I finally figured out why Facebook Live wasn't working today. But we're going to be live on Facebook week in and week out. We're going to be live on Blog Talk until we make this permanent transition to HSRN and to the other platforms that we're looking to expand into. And we want you to join these discussions. We know this information is pertinent. We know that this information is making a difference in your life, and we want to hear all about it. So enjoy the rest of your New Year's weekend. Be safe, be wise, be responsible, and we'll bring you some more information next Saturday on House Talk Pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts. Have a good day, everybody.